The new procurement for apprenticeship training provision for non-levy paying employers has been announced because the original procurement was paused in April 2017. This is because it was very much oversubscribed, but also it was felt by the DFE and the ESFA that it hadn't achieved the right balance between stability of provision, promoting competition, particularly by attracting new entrants into the market, and ensuring the very best choice and value for employers. So to maintain stability of provision, existing contracts were extended to the end of December 2017. And as we'll see later on, this has had implications for both main contractors and also subcontractors. So the procurement has been cancelled, and the new procurement process will be launched from the end of July and will close in September of this year. Right, the procurement process is for contracts to provide apprenticeship training for non-levy paying employers for new starts, and that's on both frameworks and standards from January 2018 to April 2019. So the new procurement will not affect training provision for existing learners, that's already set. Now, training providers who have successfully applied to be on the register of apprenticeship training providers can apply. The aim is to enable all employers, and that's, levy paying and non-levy paying employers, certainly from 2019, to be able to choose any provider from the register directly to deliver their apprenticeship training. It will be a competitive process, and that's obviously going to be very much about best value, and it is critical that applicants have got the capacity to deliver the ambitions underpinning the apprenticeship reforms. During this process, the register will not be reopened. I think that's got some very important implications, particularly if we're trying to attract a wider range of apprenticeship providers, for example, to offer higher and degree apprenticeships. Now, in addition, two other things are being done by the ESFA. They're going to adjust allocations where, for example, existing providers have made a good business case for some growth. And also, the first performance management point has been moved forward from August to July. And that will allow the ESFA to review current delivery and, if possible, release funds where there's evidence of unmet demand. In this new process, the ESFA is basically trying to achieve several things. First of all, it's very much at supporting achievement, as I said, of the apprenticeship reforms. And underpinning, of course, those are the industrial strategy and the skills plan. I think it's really part of this process or this transition to a more employer-led system. So hopefully it's going to better meet its objectives for high quality apprenticeship training rather than just simply volumes of apprentices. And this will hopefully achieve best value not only for the employer and the apprentice, but also for the provider and for the taxpayer. I think one critical aspect of this procurement process is support for the growth of smaller businesses, particularly the SMEs, which are not only critical for economic growth, but also they are much better and have got a higher and better track record in employing younger apprentices. And that's obviously critical in terms of participation, particularly of 16 to 18-year-olds. And I think the other reason really is to attract interest from as wide a range of high quality providers as possible. And that obviously includes employers themselves as well as HE institutions. As I said earlier, the original procurement was significantly oversubscribed and failed to deliver the assurances that both the Department for Education and ESFA were seeking. So I just want to draw a reference to a couple of announcements, or several announcements, that the ESFA made in April of this year. And I'll quote these. In order to maintain stability in the system through the start of the next academic year, and in the interim period, we will extend existing contracts held by all current providers until the end of December 2017. I've already said that. But you can see what's underpinning this is something that's a little bit more significant in that this will help to maintain quality standards So in order to do that, current providers will be given extended contracts. So they'll be able to undertake new starts on these contracts, as long as obviously they're on the new register of apprenticeship training providers. And finally, the ESFA was saying, in order to maintain stability through this transitional period, and this is very important for subcontractors, they would continue to apply current subcontracting rules to delivery of new starts to non-levy paying employers right through to the end of December 2017. As I said earlier, providers with current apprenticeship contracts were given allocations to the end of December 2017. Now, one thing to note, it was expected that these allocations would be reduced in comparison to previous years for the following reasons. First of all, a percentage of funding should now be coming to providers via the levy-paying apprenticeship delivery to larger employers. So that should replace some of what you were given in your allocation before. Similarly, you'll also find that we're expecting now to collect a 10% contribution from non-levy paying employers. So that's also factored into that allocation, as well as obviously the reductions in the funding attached to some frameworks. Now they're in these new 15 funding bands as at the same time as the new apprenticeship standards. However, many providers have indicated that they've received far greater reductions in allocations than would have been implied from these changes that have occurred. Now, this has had implications for both contractors, main contractors or prime contractors, as well as subcontractors. And I just want to cover those just with you for a moment. First of all, I think many main contractors found that the new allocation was less than they planned or bid for. But as I said, we could explain this partly through some of the things I've just covered. This could, of course, meant that any plans that they had for significant growth, which involved investment, might not actually have delivered, that might not be delivered through the allocation. I think one of the big implications for main contractors is that many of them were planning to engage non-levy paying employers or to deliver standards rather than frameworks or hire apprenticeships, including degree apprenticeships. And obviously this has been reduced because of the reductions in allocations. Now this has had a slightly different incentive in that I think many contractors have now had a greater incentive to engage much more with levy paying employers. But I think that the other issue here is not only have they tried to replace some of that, generally the potential loss of provision may impact on the achievement of those apprenticeship targets. But as we all say, are they as relevant now? This brings me really to subcontractors, and I think there are several implications for them. On the positive note, they can continue to deliver new starts under the same conditions, except obviously they've got to be on the register to deliver anything in excess of £100,000 worth of apprenticeships. Some little concerns there that there might be some slight changes in the rules relating to that, but nevertheless, even with those, there are some more significant implications. Many had hoped to secure direct contracts in their own right, and therefore might have invested in capacity, which obviously is not going to be realised as quickly as possible. They may also face reductions in the subcontract values as main contractors manage their reduced allocations. And of course that, in the extreme, could mean that subcontractors go out of business. I think if they are on the ROATP, then it might also have encouraged subcontractors to focus more on levy-paying employers. And as I said, that would also happen with main contractors. So actually, there could be a lot more competition for all providers, both mains and subcontractors. And as I said earlier, those two issues affecting main contractors and subcontractors in those allocations that were made in the interim may have led to the potential loss of a provision, which of course could have impact on the achievement of those particular targets. But as I said earlier, they might not be as relevant now. I think there are some key messages for providers who want to be successful in the process, and obviously once that's announced at the end of July. I think to be successful, providers should bear the following in mind, and that also takes account of some of the reasons they might not have got, for example, on the register of apprenticeship training providers. And I think there's some lessons to have been learnt for that. But I think the first one is to understand and respond accordingly to whatever criteria are contained within the procurement process. And that really means understanding the funder's agenda, ESFA and the DFE's agenda, in terms of delivering the priorities, for example, standards as opposed to frameworks, trying to extend the offer to include more higher and degree apprenticeships, as well as focusing on the key sectors that are critical for economic growth. And I think that really means two things for the providers. They have to make sure they've got the capacity and the capability to deliver not just quantities of apprentices, but high quality apprenticeships. And secondly, they've really got to have the systems and processes to ensure effective management of the contracts. The funders don't want to take risks with the providers, and I think it's critical that we realise that those are going to be our success factors that make the procurement process work for everyone, for employers, for the apprentices, the providers, and clearly for the government.